I heard this analogy once, when you're running this race with God, you're in your own lane, you're just running, you're focused on God, and you really shouldn't be looking to your left or right, because you're focused on God. And all of a sudden, when you see someone running at the same pace and they catch up to you on your right or your left, then that person is for you because they're chasing God at the same speed as you.
What's up, fam? Welcome back to our channel. My name is Tim. This is my beautiful wife, Pauline, and you are tuning in to another episode of the W Podcast, where you get wisdom in the word with the
Wheelers.
Hey, so we are so excited to have you all back this week, and we have a special guest in the building, Blake from Jesus Freak Club, an amazing apparel brand, and I'm going to let him share the story, but I love the mission that I understand, which is to help people be able to share their faith more through the brand. So it's going to be a great episode. And not only are we talking about that, but also how does that relate to your love life? Because some people think that their spiritual life and their love life are not the same.
It's different things.
But they connect, like they're intertwined. You can't have one and not have the other, or not have one affect the other in some way. So we're going to get into that. We're excited. Without further ado, let me introduce Blake. What's up, bro? How you doing?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're really excited to have you on. And for context, I saw you did like an Instagram story or a reel or something, just sharing how you started your brand. And it really connected with me. I just reached out to you randomly, was like, bro, I want to get you on the pod because it inspired me, hearing your story. So I would love for you to kind of just share a little bit about yourself, and we can go from there.
I appreciate that. So for starters, my name is Blake Stoner, and I am the creator of Jesus Freak Club, as you mentioned. And I think in order to get the whole picture of like how Jesus Freak Club started, I kind of have to go back and share a little bit about my testimony.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty crazy story in itself. And there's just a lot of little parts that lead up to the creation of Jesus Freak Club. So if you don't mind,
let's do it. Let's go.
Cool. So I grew up in a Christian household, and I went to church on Sundays. I went to church on Wednesdays, small groups. And me and my family were very involved in the church. And growing up, I didn't have any trials, any tribulations, and everything was good until like around late high school. And I'm just looking back now, I can notice that, I started to stray away from my faith. And, I was living a lukewarm Christian relationship. And so I ended up going to a Christian university.
Okay.
So I think that was a blessing because God kind of put me in that spot. Maybe even though that wasn't my intention, I wasn't really going there for the faith Christian aspect. I actually went there to play soccer. That was my main reason.
Nice.
So I ended up going to this Christian university, and for my first couple of years, like first 3 years, I was still living that lifestyle that was just lukewarm, and I definitely was not strong in my faith whatsoever.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah, you said you keep saying you were lukewarm, and I feel like a lot of us can relate to that. Absolutely. At some point in our life. So I'm just curious how lukewarm you were, because I know when I was in college, like I was a Christian, right? Like everybody, a lot of people say they're Christian, but I definitely was lukewarm, right? I definitely was lukewarm. But like for me, I'm the type, when I wasn't saved, I wasn't going to church. Like, why would I wake up early to go to church? Like, were you the type of person who's like, look, I'm gonna still go to church, so I'm gonna get lightning strike me? Or were you like, look, I big man upstairs, thank you, but I'm sleeping in? Like, what were you like?
So I was living the lifestyle of like just partying, drinking. At one point was smoking. It was that phase of, when you first get into college and you get exposed to all of that.
Yeah.
And I dove right into all of that for like 2 or 3 years. And in the same way, though, I was going to church on Sundays still. So I had a relationship with God still. But my lifestyle just was not reflecting, my relationship with God and how it should be. So I was living a kind of a two-faced relationship.
That makes sense. Like the Monday through Saturday was kind of whatever you wanted to do, but then you were like, all right, I go to Sundays. I grew up going to church on Sundays, kind of like what I do. It wasn't really like a big deal. It was just kind of like a habit, but during the week you were being a college kid.
Exactly. You got it. So from there, late in my college years, I kind of hit rock bottom. And that happens whenever you're searching for fulfillment in this world. And that's exactly what I was doing. I mean, I was trying to fill this void in my heart with partying, drinking, all of that. And so, but I mean, at one point or another, you can't fill it. It's always going to be empty. And so that's when I hit rock bottom. And from there, with my Christian background, luckily I was able to fall back on that.
Yeah.
And I was like, in my head, I was like, I don't know what else to do anymore. God, I'm going to give you my heart for a week. I'm going to do it for a week.
Trial period.
And I was like, okay, God, you have my heart for a week. Let's see what happens. And so what that kind of looked like was I would wake up super early in the morning, like 6 a.m, and I would just dive straight into the Bible and just study his word for an hour before my classes. And, I would listen to worship music as I was getting ready just throughout the day. And from there, at the end of that week, I noticed that void in my heart was filled rather than empty after that week. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. It's like, I want to keep doing that. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna do another week. And so it kind of just built over time. And I was like, you know what? I'm done trying to fill my heart with these worldly things that are just leaving me empty.
Yeah.
And that's when I made like a final decision of I'm giving my heart to God fully, and it's the best decision that I've ever made for sure.
Yeah, I love that so much. And it's cool how you can just give God a little space.
Yeah.
And he can still enter it. I think sometimes people think, you hear the saying before, like, I got to clean myself up before I come to God. I got to be perfect. And that's the complete opposite. Like,
right.
God just needs you to give him a little opening. And honestly, I had a similar story in the sense that before I ever was trying to live for God, my best friend was hosting a Connect group at the time. And I was like,
who else was hosting the Connect group?
She actually was hosting it. I know he was hosting it too. And
in my apartment.
But the only reason I went to the Connect group was because I was like, I want to support my friend. And like, if I grow closer to God, that's cool too. Like that's literally what I said, what I felt like. If I grow closer to God, that's cool, but that's not why I'm going.
Yeah. And
that's all the Lord needed was that little crack. And then he came in and like my life has not been the same since. Actually, it's around the 9-year anniversary of me coming to God, which is good.
Nice.
We actually shared our story on our pod. So if you want to check it out, definitely we'll put the link in the bio. But I just love that story because I think there's so many people who struggle with that.
Yeah.
Who even watching this, like you're watching a podcast about godly dating, but you're still in a space where you feel like you can't really come to him.
Yeah. I mean, I even think like your story, speaking of, like, okay, I gave God a week, like the small amount of time. And just like you said, God takes something so small. I mean, the miracle of the loaves and the fish, like that's God's MO, the wine, like he takes something so small and multiplies it to however much we need or whoever is in need needs it. But I think that's so good too, because so many people feel that way with just their relationships of like, oh well, I'm not, you don't know my past, like God's not going to bless me with a godly marriage or a godly relationship. Like, why would a godly man or woman want to be with me knowing what I've done? But it's like, if you give God like one day, like he will show you all that he can do with you. And like God uses broken people. Like nobody's past is clean, or else we wouldn't need Jesus.
So you you gave your life to Christ officially. Was it the next week that you started Jesus Freak Club, or what did that look like? How did we get where you are now?
Yeah, so it was actually, I would say, 3 months after that. After I had been working on my heart, and it was in that time period of those 3 months where I was building my relationship. I was learning more about my relationship with God and my faith, and from there, I just realized I don't really know how to share my faith with people. And that's I think that's an important part, because we're supposed to make disciples, and that's something that I was struggling with, especially in a college scene. People really don't know how to act around, the Christianity, and
You were
you would
playing
think,
soccer at this time?
yes, at this time I was still playing soccer,
Yeah, that's hard.
and you would think at a Christian university that everyone's Christian, everyone's you know what I mean. So that was just really tough to like stand out, especially after flipping 180 from who I was to who my new self. After giving my heart to Christ, I felt like people were just going to be thinking this guy's a hypocrite, and people did think that. And that was something that I had to, unfortunately, I had to prove to them after consistently, maybe talking to them about my faith. I just had to show that to others around me, and essentially show like how Jesus is around my campus. And so I always was striving to portray myself in that light, just around campus. So from there, I was thinking of different ways to share my faith, without maybe verbally saying anything.
Yeah.
And so that's when I came up with the clothing brand Jesus Freak Club, and it's actually what I'm wearing.
Love
it. This is the very first shirt that I kind of designed.
What?
And I'm actually a digital arts student, so I'm very familiar with graphic design, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna use this talent and see what God can do with it. So I created this shirt, and this is the very first shirt, and it says Jesus loves you on the back. So
I love it.
And so I was like, I wonder if this is gonna actually help me with sharing my faith. So I made a prototype of this shirt, and I wore it throughout a week, and I actually started like 5 to 10 conversations just from my shirt that I was wearing.
Wow. What would people say to you? Like, what type of reactions would you get when you wore it on campus?
Well, a lot of people were like, even outside of campus, I had a lot of conversations outside of campus. Many people came up to me, and they kind of just appreciated what I was wearing in general. They're like, wow, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. Or some people were like, asked me who Jesus was.
Yeah.
And they're like, who Jesus is. They didn't even know who Jesus was.
Wow.
And I can't imagine how many like seeds I was planting just from people looking at it.
Right.
Without even coming up to talk to me. So
yeah. I think that is so cool, because I also got saved in college, and that's one of the kind of like, not struggles, but it was like a big conversation amongst my friend group. It was like, how many people did you pray for today? Like, how many people did you talk to Jesus about? And like, I think everybody has a struggle of like, I don't want to be that weird, like Jesus freak, like who's always pushing Jesus on people. Obviously, it's a good thing to be known for in like a kingdom sense, but of course we all have our own insecurities. And to your point too, I also had a time in college where I wasn't saved, and people were like, yeah, I remember you partying and drinking and all the things, and you do feel like an imposter in some way. But I love the boldness of like speaking without, or sharing a message without speaking, with like wearing it on your clothes, where it's like, yeah, like this is who I rep. And like Tim and I were talking earlier today about just different clothing brands and designers and things like that, and like how I was talking when I was growing up in middle school, like Abercrombie and Fitch was like the big like store everybody wanted to shop at, and my mom of course it's like $75 for like a super thin t-shirt. And my mom was like, why are you wearing a t-shirt that's a walking billboard? Like, you're advertising for essentially this family that you don't know. And it's not even that great quality of clothes. But just to say like about how much we wear, it says something about us. And the Bible even says that, that man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. But it's still true that man looks at the outward appearance. So like, even though in our hearts we may say, oh, like I love God and I love people, but how we dress, and obviously for all my ladies listening, sometimes we struggle with this a little bit more. Not to say that women are immodest, but it's just something we struggle with like, dressing in a way that we feel comfortable and still feel beautiful. But I think that just what we wear on our bodies, it just says so much about us. And using that as an opportunity of like, it's like, hey, if it is hard for me to talk about people to Jesus and I want to spread his message and his love, like, I love that you found a way to do that while not making it harder for yourself, and like you're kind of removing the excuses, if you will. So I think that's really simple.
Yeah. So people were coming up to you, you started having these conversations. Were you like nervous like during these conversations? Because I feel like there's so many people watching this right now who love God, but they don't have those type of conversations with people about their faith. Like, honestly, there's a lot of people who, dare I say, are like undercover Christians. Like, outside of going to church, no one else knows that they love God. So what was that like for you in those interactions?
Yeah, I definitely was nervous. And honestly, to this day, I still am nervous when people, come up to me. And it's something that I don't think I'll ever get 100% perfect and comfortable with, just because I don't know.
Yeah.
It was just a nervous thing for me then, and it still is. But the growth that I've had from the very beginning to starting Jesus Freak Club to now is astronomical.
Right.
It's super cool to see how I've grown, and like one of you mentioned, once you put this on, it's like you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the first step. And I'm gonna wear this. It's a walking billboard for Jesus.
Right.
And someone's going to see this and they're going to know that, they're going to know right away. And if they come talk to me, great. If they don't, hopefully that planted a seed in their heart. And so I think that it is a little nerve-wracking, but once you put it on, I think that's the initiative. And that's the first big step of like, okay, I'm proud of my faith.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of God.
It's kind of like a jersey. Like, people, I happen to represent and be a fan of a team that a lot of people in the area we live in aren't a fan of. It's kind of like, you're, like you said, you're proud of where you come from. Whenever I wear my Patriots jersey, I get heckled, and it's very, very stressful. But it's kind of like everybody knows where I'm at. Everybody knows, what team I'm repping. And it's the same thing, like for any of you guys watching, like whatever team is your team, whatever jersey you wear, whenever your sports season is, like that's the team you're proud of. That's, everybody knows where you belong. And it's kind of the same thing with our clothing, or even if you wear a brand that is faith-based, like some people might say. And even Tim has a really cool story of meeting one of our good friends. Like, she had on a Lecrae shirt. Was it Lecrae? A Lecrae shirt in class. And he was like, oh, I never knew, that I never would have started talking to her, if she didn't have that shirt on. And now we're really good friends with them. So it's so cool to see how, if we make a bold move in the morning about what we're going to wear, how that can change the trajectory of your day. And you don't even have to, people will stress a lot of times about like conversation starters, especially when it comes to like dating. Like, oh, what do I say to a girl that I like, or like a guy that I like? I mean, if you wear a Jesus Freak shirt, then they'll be like, oh, you love Jesus? Me too.
Exactly. And that was kind of my whole reason of starting. Is I think the main thing I was struggling with is maybe telling a stranger about Jesus. Like, how do you just talk to someone like, hey, I love Jesus. Like,
I talk to you about Jesus.
So this is the idea that I came up with, to allow strangers or people from the outside to look at me and say, oh, okay, this kid loves Jesus. And that might prompt them to start a conversation with me, and that definitely has helped by wearing them, and it's created a ton of conversations. It's been super cool.
So outside of wearing Christian apparel, is there any other tip, maybe just one tip that you have that you can share with somebody that may be nervous, who's like, all right, like this sounds good, but I still don't know about, sharing my faith?
Yeah, I would say two different things. Definitely spending time with God is super important, and when you're in the Word and you're in the Bible consistently, I think that definitely prepares your mind, it prepares your heart for these situations, and so I think that's a huge thing for sure. And also, in those moments where you are hesitant, I think it's super cool to kind of be like, hey, God, just give me clarity on what I should do, give me discernment, and calm my nerves. And we don't think about, talking to God. And I've done that myself in many different situations. Whenever I was nervous to do something, I just was like, hey, God, you know how I feel right now. So just put your hand around my shoulder and let's do this. And there's been many times where like all the weight is just off my shoulders just from that prayer, and then I am able to go ahead and do whatever God has prompted me to do.
Yeah, I love that. So you told me earlier, so I know this, but the audience doesn't know yet, that you're engaged, which is congratulations, is awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Was there any correlation between you sharing your faith and like how did that affect your love life at all? Like, did it have any impact, or was that
you meet Christian girls?
Was that separate? It was like, look, I always been good in this area. I ain't never had no problem.
Oh my
God.
So
the chick magnet is what you're asking.
That's not really what I'm asking.
It's funny you ask. I was actually in that period, where I was growing in my relationship with God after that phase. I had no interest in girls whatsoever. I was fully focused on God and growing my relationship with God. And I didn't even think anything of it. And God was like, here's your woman. And I was like, okay, God, okay. So if I can go ahead and explain a little bit about where I met her. And we met at Passion. If you guys know what Passion is, it's a youth
the conference.
And I just randomly met her at this youth conference. And obviously, I was growing in my faith strictly just with Jesus. And I didn't have anything in mind about a girl. And he placed this girl right across from me at this diner at like 2 a.m. And we kind of just made eye contact. And I had recognized her from somewhere online, actually. And I was like, she looks really familiar. And she recognized me as well. So we kind of had a little background on each other. And we met. And from there, we ended up doing long distance for a little bit because she lived in Texas and I lived in Missouri at the time. So later on, after talking to her, I asked her about, was she looking for a guy? And she also said that she was very focused on her relationship with God, and she had no interest in guys at all. And so it's kind of cool to see how both of us were fully focused on God, and we didn't have any, desire to pursue a relationship with the opposite sex. And we, God was like, okay, here you go. You guys can be together.
Wow.
No, I love that. And honestly, like, I really feel like more people have that story than don't. Like for me, I had a situation where I first got saved, and I was kind of the opposite of you. Like, I was focused on God, but also I was still trying to get a girlfriend. But it came to a point where I told God, you know what? And I was young at this point. I was like 20, 21. I was like probably 20. And I was like, God, if I don't date until I'm 27, I'm thinking that's old, right? Like, if I don't date till I'm 27, like, I'm fine with that. Like,
7 years out is a good amount,
but it's really not that long. But I was like, Lord, like, I'm okay. You're all I need.
Amen.
And like 2-3 months later, me and Pauline started dating, and I just feel like a lot of people
Want it too bad.
Want it too bad. No, like seriously, like a lot of people want to be in a relationship so bad, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in a relationship.
Yeah.
But when you want that more than you want God, that's when you start getting in trouble. So if you're someone who really, really wants to be in a relationship, I would just ask you to do a self-assessment and really just ask yourself, do I want this because I want to be in a relationship and I want to have somebody to live a life with and build God's kingdom, or I just want this because I'm trying to fill a void.
Yeah.
That only God can fill.
And it's definitely not to make anybody feel badly because, I mean, we all have things in our lives, whether it's like if you want a certain job or you want to buy a house or you want, you know, certain type of status or income level, or maybe you want to be a certain size, like you're trying to lose weight or a certain type of body image or something like that. And there are a lot of things that are competing for God's spot in our hearts. And relationships, of course, will be at the top, especially if you live in the US, because of what's around us. Like in the culture, you can't turn on TV or social media or whatever. You can't escape this constant image of relationships and love. And a lot of times we idolize love and relationships and marriage, especially in the church, which is so sad because you're a Christian, you're supposed to be in love with Jesus, and like you are, but it's just not as much as maybe you are of like this idea of a personal relationship. And then when you get into a marriage, you get disappointed because you're like, oh, this person actually stinks. Like they smell, they pull the covers off of me when we were sleeping together. Like they don't cook, they don't clean the way that I thought they were going to. Like you're just constantly, and you have to realize like this person, this whole relationship marriage thing is great when it's in its proper place. But if it's like, this is going to validate me, this is going to, once I get my ring, once I get down the aisle, then I'll be the woman or the man that I thought I could be. And like, that's never the case. And again, a lot of people are like that with certain cars that they want. Like, oh, once I get here, then I'll feel like I made it. It doesn't exist. The finish line always is moving. So it's not, I say that because I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, this is a relationship podcast. How are you going to be like discouraging people from being in a relationship? We love relationships. And we're all for them, but they only work in their proper place. And they should never be above Jesus because he's the only perfect anything.
Yeah.
So obviously you're engaged. Is there anything that surprised you about engagement that you were not expecting?
I mean, the transition from dating to engagement, I'm surprised on. I mean, there really wasn't that big of a difference. I think it was important for us to continue to, date each other.
Yeah.
Even after just the girlfriend and boyfriend stage, and as we're in the period of, between that and getting married, it's been really cool to grow with each other and just continue to date each other. And obviously, we're super excited to get married, so we're ready for that journey as well. But it's been super cool to just see how our relationship has developed over the year, and it's definitely been important to keep God at the center of our relationship. I always like to think of it as like a triangle. So it's me on one corner, her on the other, and God's keeping us together at the cornerstone. So
I literally thought about that image when you were sharing about how you all met, and you were like, oh, I'm focused on Jesus, she's focused on Jesus, and then God was like, okay, well, I'm telling you to now
how did y'all
bring your gaze this way.
How did y'all get past that? Y'all both just wanted to focus on Jesus. How'd y'all end up actually focusing on each other?
That's a good point. It was just one of those things that clicked, and that sounds so cliche. But I like to think of it as, I heard this analogy once, when you're running this race with God, you're running to chase God, and you're in your own lane, you're just running, you're focused on God, and you really shouldn't be looking to your left or right, because you're focused on God. And all of a sudden, when you see someone running at the same pace and they catch up to you on your right or your left, then you know that person is for you because they're chasing God at the same speed as you. And so I just think that's a super cool analogy.
Yeah. No, I've heard that before too, and I agree. Like that's really what you want. And I was telling Pauline this today, that I'm so grateful that she's my wife, because we have a son And like she does little things that are intentional to try to help him know God and try to help him want to fall in love with Jesus on his own. And I just think about, what if I would have married somebody that was just like, when it comes to God, they weren't really in love with him. They weren't pursuing him on their own. How different would that affect my life? Not even just my relationship, but now with my kids, and like wanting to make sure. And that's why you get in a danger zone. There's some people who they maybe have been waiting a long time to date, and they're starting to consider, should I date somebody outside of my race? And I can understand why you would consider that, because of the longing. But at the same time, you want to think about the future.
Wait, clarify. You said outside of my race. Do you mean like physical race, like
I didn't mean
white, or do you mean like an analogy?
I did not mean race.
Okay, clarify.
I meant religion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, yeah, I meant religion. Thank you. So let me just reset.
You heard that too, Blake. Were you like,
I was wondering.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for clarifying. See, that's why another reason you want a wife. Who can help you be better. No, I meant religion.
Outside of your faith. Okay.
Yeah, you want to make sure you don't date somebody outside of your faith, because what's going to happen when you have kids? And then you're going to want them to believe certain things about God, but the person you're married to now may not. And that's just something we don't think about sometimes when we make decisions in the moment. We're not always thinking about the future.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the Bible talks about being unequally yoked as well. And I think that that's why I love the race analogy, the running race analogy that you gave, because so many times if we think about that whole analogy, if you're running a race, running a marathon, everybody is running in the same direction, right? So you could kind of say, oh, everybody is running after Jesus. And that's true. You know, everybody who's a Christian. But there's reasons why some people run races. There's reason why some people walk them. Everybody has different things that they're dealing with and different capacities and different skill levels. And it's going to be really frustrating if you're at the front of the pack and you're like leading and you're trying to drag your spouse along with you. I mean, technically you guys are running the same race, right? You're going after Jesus. And that's good, because you definitely don't want somebody who's going in the opposite direction or sideways or whatever. But also, it's not fun to drag dead weight. And also, nobody really wants to be dragged. Like, if people are slow, like it's because, especially when we're talking about Jesus, it's because they want to be slow or they don't know how to increase their capacity. And of course, we all learn from one another, and there are going to be times where you're running a little bit faster than your spouse and vice versa, but you guys are tethered at that point. So it shouldn't be, a front race, back race type of difference. It's like a very gradual difference, or incremental. But I think that that's very, very important to point out, because sometimes people are like, oh, they're a Christian, they go to my church, like it's good enough. And it's like, no, let's have conversations. Like, so you love Jesus. So what does that mean? So you wear a Jesus Freak Club shirt. All right. So like, but how much do you read your Bible? What do you hear from the Lord when you talk to him? Oh, you go to church like twice a year. Okay. That's good. And maybe that's better than what you did last year. But me, I go to church twice a week. So I'm gonna need, we're not really running at the same pace.
Yeah.
Because so many people, like you said, out of desperation kind of overlook it. And we know a lot of people have gotten heartbroken kind of like during the dating phase, like, oh, especially if you're meeting people online, like, oh, this person's not as saved as I thought they were. Because again, it's like, oh, are you Christian? Well, I'm not Muslim, I'm not Hindu. So I guess I'm Christian. Like, I don't know what else is there, especially in the US. I know in other countries, like, of course, there are other faiths are more popular. But, in the US, Christianity is kind of like the default. But a lot of times people don't really, like, as far as like relationship goes. So I love that running race analogy, and hopefully it'll help some of you all listening who are like, oh, well, this person's a Christian, but I'm not sure. And really the only way to get to know someone and what pace they're running at is to ask questions over a period of time. And I want to ask you, Blake, actually, how long have you and your fiance, like, how long did it take for you guys to get to know each other and date and get engaged and all that? What was your timeline like?
Okay, yeah, so we started dating, we were talking, over long distance for a month. And from there, we kind of were classified as dating. But I didn't want to put the title on it until I met her dad and her parents.
Wow.
So I didn't actually start dating her until like 3 months. because I didn't get a chance to go down to Texas. We were a thing, we were talking, and something that was very interesting with long distance is we just talked on FaceTime so much that I think our relationship and getting to know each other, like, it went way faster than our regular relationship, because that's all we had to do is get to know each other.
Right. And did you guys meet before quarantine or after or during, I guess?
It was after. This is in 2022.
Okay.
2022.
Because I've heard that, I mean, also with long distance couples, but also people who met during quarantine, like if they met in 2020 because everything was locked down, that you had no choice but to talk a lot, which is great because that's how you get to know somebody, is through conversation. And a lot of times people skip a lot of conversations, and your relationship can advance faster because it's not about like, oh, we've been together for a year, 2 years, 3 years. It's like, what's the quality of your time together? Because we know a lot of couples who, like, they were together for like 2 years and they don't talk about anything. So kind of stupid. Not stupid, but like kind of just, it can get more distractions when you see each other a lot because you want to like eat each other's faces, and just, it's a lot of
exactly. So that was really, it was cool to get to grow that fast with her.
Yeah.
Even though the long distance sucked, at the time it sucked, and looking back at it, I kind of realized, that we were able to get to know each other, and that leads to we got engaged in July, so it's technically 7 months.
Wow.
Getting to know each other. And so that's why I was trying to preface that we got to know each other very well with endless FaceTime calls every day.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. I feel like FaceTime is such, even if you aren't long distance, like that's a way, and I'm sure everybody does it anyway, like somebody you're dating, FaceTime, like a couple times a week, like you should be talking every day if you really, are excited about the person and want to share yourself with them, get to know them better. But FaceTime is a safer way to keep boundaries too.
Yeah, for sure. So Blake, is there any final thoughts you want to share with people? Or if not, you can definitely just let us know. How can we connect with your brand? How can we connect with you? All that good stuff.
Yeah. Some final thoughts I would say is, if you're seeking a relationship with someone, definitely get your heart aligned with God and pursue that relationship to an extent as much as you can. And then wait for God's timing. I think that's super huge, and God will give you that person whenever you're ready. So just don't rush it. There's no point in rushing God's timing, because He's got a plan for you, and I think that you should believe in that and trust His plan. Those are my final thoughts. If you want to connect with me, my Instagram is blake.stoner. And the Instagram for Jesus Freak Club is just Jesus Freak Club. And if you want to shop and get some merch, it's JesusFreakClub.com.
Love it. And we'll put all of that in the show notes in the description to make sure, if you want to support the brand, if you want to share your faith in an easier way, that's definitely something I want to do and get better at always. So,
or maybe you'll attract somebody who also loves Jesus. But if not, you can make a friend or share the love of God.
Amen.
Yeah.
This has been another episode of the W Podcast. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this video.
To get more Christian relationship advice, subscribe to our channel.
And make sure you check out our other videos as well.